Democratic Autopsy Report, 192 pages of absolutely nothing. Good afternoon, America. Well, I have officially survived 192 pages of the Democratic Party's so-called autopsy report on why Vice President Kamala Harris lost the 2024 presidential election. And let me just say this right off the bat. If I was the victim of homicide, I would not want the people who wrote the report performing my autopsy. Because after reading this thing cover to cover, I can confidently say they somehow managed to spend nearly 200 pages explaining absolutely nothing. Nothing. I could have saved the Democratic Party millions of dollars and written the entire conclusion on the back of a diner napkin in under 30 seconds. Here it is. Americans were tired of being lied to. There, done. Investigation over. Cue the dramatic music. Roll credits. You know what amazes me about this report? The one issue that hung over the entire Biden Harris administration like a dark cloud was barely addressed honestly at all. The American people watched for years as the White House, legacy media, Democratic operatives, and political insider insisted President Joe Biden was perfectly fine, sharp as ever, running circles around staffers, cheap fakes, conspiracy theories, right-wing misinformation. Really? Because the American people watched speeches, they watched the wandering, they watched the confusion, they watched the freeze-ups, they watched the aides guiding him like a GPS with low battery power. And then came the catastrophic June of 2024 debate, one. And suddenly the same people who spent years telling Americans not to believe their own eyes had a miraculously political awakening. Overnight, it became, oh wow, maybe Houston, we have a problem. No kidding. And what happened next may go down as one of the most ironic moments in modern political history. The party that consistently claimed it was saving democracy essentially bypassed democracy altogether. No real competitive primary, no voting choice, no open convention battle. Instead, Vice President Kamala Harris was politically anointed like she had just descended from the clouds carrying a secret election tablet. Not one Democrat voter casted a primary ballot, primarily choosing her as a nominee after Biden exited. Not one. But apparently, we were all supposed to clap like trained seals and pretend this was most democratic process in history. Now let's talk about Kamala Harris herself. Democrats generally thought Americans were going to ignore 4 years of political baggage, awkward interviews, staff turnover, historically low approval rates, and verbal disasters because suddenly she was the nominee. Apparently, they believed the country fell out of the coconut tree. And yes, that phrase follows her everywhere for a reason, because voters didn't see authenticity. They saw confusion. They saw scripted messages. They saw someone many Americans already viewed as politically unprepared before she even became the nominee. The autopsy report tries desperately to blame messaging failures, campaign structure, rural outreach, media ecosystems, and misinformation. But here's the problem. You can't message your way out of reality. You can't gaslight people struggling to buy groceries. You can't lecture families about how biometrics is working while they're watching rent, utilities, insurance, and food prices explode. And you definitely cannot tell Americans the border is secure while millions watch chaos unfolding for years. The report dances around like you're walking through a political minefield wearing ballet shoes. And then we arrive at the vice presidential pickup. Oh boy, Governor Tim Walz. Honestly, the decision alone deserves its own separate autopsy report because Democrats had another option sitting right in front of them, Josh Shapiro, popular, moderate image, from a crucial battleground state, strong political instincts, high crossover appeal, but Democrats passed, and many Americans immediately started asking why. Was it the ideology, internal activist pressures, fear of backlash from radical factions with the party? The report barely touches the internal fractions surrounding anti-Semitism concerns and growing tensions inside the Democratic coalition following the Israel-Hamas conflict. Instead, it tiptoes around the issue like everyone collectively signed a legal waiver before writing the report, because acknowledging the obvious political division inside the party would require actual honesty, and honestly appears to have been placed on the unpaid leave sometime around 2021. Now, to be fair, the report did actually stumble into one of the truthful observation. Buried somewhere inside the 192-page political sleeping pillow was the realization that Democrats abandoned large parts of the working class Americans, especially the heartland. The very people Democrats once claimed they represented, factory workers, union families, small towns, middle Americans, working class voters, people who increasingly felt looked down on, ignored, or lectured to by elite political strategists operating from luxury offices in Washington, New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And this is where the Democrat establishment still doesn't understand the problem. Americans don't like being talked down to. They don't like being called extremists because they disagree with policy. They don't like being told inflation isn't real. They don't like being told crimes aren't happening. They don't like being told the border crisis isn't a crisis. And they especially don't like being told they're dangerous for questioning government narratives. So after 192 pages, millions of dollars, countless political consultants, and enough corporate buzzwords to power a TED Talk conversation, what was the final conclusion? Democrats still appear incapable of admitting the central issue. The American people stopped trusting them, not because of the slogans, not because of the podcasts, not because of the messaging, not because of the rural voters suddenly became invisible, but because millions of Americans felt they were repeatedly misled about the conditions of the country and the conditions of their own president. And no amount of consult written political therapy sessions is going to fix that overnight. As for me, I wasted hours of my life reading this thing so you didn't have to. And honestly, by page 150, I was beginning to think that the real victims requiring an autopsy was my attention span. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, senior correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. At least I admitted when something was dead on arrival.